Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having us here today. We weren't up here when we were introduced, so maybe we'll reintroduce ourselves. My name is Ethan Bain. I'm the Executive Director of Strategy and Planning with the Government of Alberta's Cannabis Secretariat. So we're the small group of bureaucrats who've designed Alberta's legislative and regulatory framework for recreational cannabis. And
I'm Dave Barry. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Services at the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commission. The regulatory arm of the Commission regulates all gaming activities in the province, all liquor activities in the province. We do some work with contraband tobacco, and now we will be doing work with cannabis.
Matt Zablosky with the City of Calgary. I'm a business strategist and the project lead for the legalization of cannabis.
So I think what we'd like to do is give as much time as we can for questions and discussion. I'll maybe say a couple of things by way of introduction. Minister Ganley, I think, very capably outlined some of the key features of the regulatory system in Alberta in terms of the minimum age for consumption of cannabis, the public consumption rules, and certainly we can get into our rationale behind some of those decisions if people would like in the questions. We're more than happy to do that. What I'll maybe do instead of summarizing those over again is say a couple things about our philosophical approach to this. So given that you're all here today at a cannabis conference, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you have a particular interest in perhaps participating in the industry or at least finding out what this is all about. We have had to, I think, balance the perspectives of people who are really interested in this industry and see a lot of opportunity here with Albertans who are cautious, maybe not supportive of legalization from the outset, and are advising their governments to take a cautious approach to how we roll this out. So the 4 policy priorities that the minister outlined in terms of keeping cannabis out of the hands of children, in terms of protecting public health, in terms of promoting safety on the roads and workplaces, and in terms of limiting that illegal market, those are our attempt to balance those interests between people who quite frankly, I mean, we encountered two kinds of audiences that participated in the engagement process that the minister talked about. There are those who think legalization of cannabis is a long time coming, and it's essentially the formal recognition of something that's been in our society and has been going on for a long time, and it's not a huge deal. And there's many respects in which that perspective is valid. And there are others who think this is a generational, fundamental change in our society. And it's going to affect our relationships in the workplace, it's going to affect safety on our roads, it's going to affect various aspects of the way we live together as citizens. And there's many ways in which that perspective is true also. And so in designing our regulatory regime, everything from decisions about where you can smoke and vape in public to the criteria that Dave and the AGLC are going to apply to do their due diligence on people who want to open a retail outlet has been an attempt to balance those perspectives and to roll out the system in a cautious, responsible way that meets Albertans' expectations, but also allows the right level of access to safe, legal product and allows people who are interested in pursuing business opportunities in the industry to pursue opportunities. And it was interesting just being next door in the Chamber of Commerce luncheon, and there are people who are enthusiastic about this this sphere of economic activity, and they see all the possibilities that might arise. And we're bureaucrats, so we don't actually look at new unregulated territory and start salivating over it and say, let's design some regulations. We look to the people of Alberta to advise us through our engagement process as to what their priorities are and what they wanted us to do. And the other thing we do is we look to analogs. We look to things that we have experience with and that are we can draw some principles from. And obviously you'll see cannabis is not exactly like alcohol. It's not exactly like tobacco. But there are many key features of the regulatory approaches to alcohol, to tobacco, and in fact a little bit to gaming as well, that we built into our system. So that's just a little bit from my perspective as to the approach we've taken on some of the regulations. If people have specific questions, like I said, about our reasoning, about what the rules actually are, if you haven't had a chance to go to our website, alberta.ca/cannabis, and have a look at the provincial regulatory framework, and you have questions about the rules themselves, I'd be happy to address those as well. Dave?
Sure. I'll make sure I leave lots of time for questions, but I think I'll just talk for about 5 minutes on some commonly asked questions for sure, and then maybe that'll help guide us a little bit on the discussion. To steal a quote from Ethan and his colleagues, and I can't remember Ethan who said it, but he's laughing already, I think he knows, but we are building the airplane as we're flying it. And so I think we're all in the same boat here. The timelines that we were presented with are very aggressive. And so in short, some of the things that we've decided to do and the information we've rolled out to date, and perhaps all the bigger questions that you have in your mind that you don't know the answers to, are because we're building the airplane as we're flying it. So we keep that in mind. But I will talk just on a high level about the 3 things that are happening right now and that are going to happen soon. And the first is the licensing and application phase. So I'm just going to preface it with that all the work that Ethan and the team did at the Cannabis Secretariat and all the input that Albertans provided guided the AGLC at the end of the day in developing its regulatory framework and what you see in the application package. As everybody is probably aware, we are going to start accepting applications on March 6th. And we made that announcement about 3 weeks prior to that there with Minister Ganley and I down in Calgary. And the reason why we made the announcement almost 3 weeks ago and then we're going to start licensing on the 6th of March is for many people entering this space, this is going to be brand new. Never seen a due diligence form before unless you've been involved in gaming. And you've never seen a licensing application form and the kind of criteria is required for a license application, very much similar to liquor. So unless you've been in those 2 spaces, it's going to be entirely foreign to you. And I can tell you on the due diligence side, of course, there's not a lot of people in here that are probably own a casino. So, that's going to be a new thing. So we wanted to have lots of time for people to look at the requirements and ask questions and then prepare themselves for March 6th and beyond. And I'll say March 6th and beyond because March 6th is just a day. It's not a race to March 6th. And so if you think that you need to get your application package in on March 6th, that's not the case. That's the day we'll start accepting them. And everybody's licensing process will be a little bit different. If you happen to be a CEO of a complex publicly traded company, your application review on background check is going to be quite arduous and long. And if you are a sole proprietorship and a single owner, background check for a single owner won't be as long because there's not too much to look at. We're just going to look at you and your source of income and your record. And so everybody's timeline is going to be different. But the fact is we wanted to start on March 6th so that everybody, or at least the bulk of applications, could be done well in advance of when the switch comes on. And none of us know when that date is right now, and I think we know what's going on federally with the Senate. But the fact is the AGLC is prepared for the beginning of July. And that's why we launched now. That's why the entire timeline, even around your engagement process, was built towards us being ready for July. So don't worry. And I told my friends at the Calgary Inspections Office that I would say this, but you don't need to line up at the door at the Calgary Inspections Office at 8 o'clock on the morning on the 6th, because it's not going to do anything for you. You'll be wasting your time. Just get your application in. And on the first couple days, we know there's going to be quite a few coming in, so we're just going to be taking them and getting ready to open them up and process them. So, it's not a first in and first out scenario. So just be aware of that. And our intention is to have everybody, ready to go in time for legalization. So, with regards to the application process, there's 2 parts to it. One is the background check, and the other part is the licensing process. That's very similar to that with liquor. And we all know that municipalities still have a lot of work to do themselves. They just got the regulations from us a matter of 2 weeks ago, and they need to develop land use bylaws, etc., at least on the ones that wish to do so. And that's going to be a deciding factor as well as to, you know, how fast we can process applications. And this is not putting anything on the municipalities, but I think everybody just needs to be aware that we just have to be patient for the spring here and allow us to do our work and move you forward. I'll move on from the application process now to the Sell Safe Cannabis Staff Training Program. For those of you that are familiar with it, we have gambling and liquor education programs that are required for staff in those environments, and it's very much going to be the same thing for cannabis. If you're familiar with the ProServe liquor training program, I've seen the entire program content. It's already in web development. It's going to look very familiar. As a matter of fact, it's going to look very familiar because there's a lot of cross themes that are applied to both. For example, serving intoxicated patrons, you can expect that is going to be exactly the same. How do I ask for identification? How to check identification to make sure it's valid? Very, very similar. Liabilities. And then, of course, there's a very specific section on there about public health requirements and concerns and information about the product itself. Now, I know we're a regulator, and I'm not a grower, I'm not a licensed producer. I can tell you that our content was built very heavily with our friends at Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services, and along with Health Canada and all the information that they have. The Sell Safe program is about how to sell responsibly. It is not going to make you an expert in the product lines. That is best left up to business. So it's up for you to, you know, make sure that your employees understand the products and what they're selling, and provide, you know, that type of, quite frankly, retail advice that needs to be provided. So that program will be launching on the 1st of May. At the same time, that's when we're going to start accepting applications for retail workers. We chose the date, the 1st of May, for 2 reasons. Number one is my program's not ready, so I can't put you through a program that's not done. So, and of course, we couldn't build significant portions of the program until the regulations were approved by Cabinet. So those were just done a couple weeks ago, so we're really actually still kind of cleaning up our program to make sure that everything that's in there is actually compliant with law. It would be a good thing. And so that's the first reason. And the second reason is it's still plenty of time in advance for employers to make sure their workers are trained and to be ready for July. So you got 60 days to do that. And the other reason, I guess there was 3 because I said there was 2, was for those of you that are familiar with getting criminal record employment checks from your local police service, some police services are faster than others. They have, you know, queues. So from March 6th to the beginning of May is still within 60 days. And I believe that's the time frame. I think we asked for 90, that your criminal record check be within 90 days. So if an employee was to get one today, by the time May 1st rolled around, they'd be good to go. So that gives them lots of time. We don't want to see lineups out the door at your local police station. And I will say one thing about the police station is make sure that you get your criminal record check from your local police service. I'm not accepting police criminal record checks from the Atlantic Canada, for example. Your local police service knows you best, and that's where the AGLC will get the best information to make sure that you're qualified. Last, I'll move into the online store in e-commerce, which is tied in part to wholesale price and retail price, which I know is a very, very topic of interest for everybody. Hard to build a business plan when you don't know what the wholesale price is. So on the 12th of February, the AGLC concluded or closed an expression of interest opportunity for all licensed producers in Canada to make submissions to us in order to for the government and us to carry their product. A bunch of the producers have been going through an interview process, and that is going to wrap up very soon. What I can tell everybody, because I know we hear the question a lot, is, you know, is there going to be enough for stores? Are you going to be able to supply us? And what I can tell you is that we were very, very happy with the response rate. I know there was a bunch of CEO execs and people from growers on the last luncheon panel there. And I've heard from a number of them that they're very, very interested in doing business in Alberta. for a couple of reasons. Alberta's very young, and if you were to look at the liquor business, we sell a lot of liquor. We do, and we have a young population, and our sales are quite vibrant, and so they see opportunity there. And of course, as everybody knows, we're a private market, so there's going to be lots of opportunity. And so with that in mind, we know that the fourth priority objective was to limit the illicit market. And so the AGLC is fully aware of the fact that we need to make sure that we have a wholesale price and a retail price that's competitive with the illicit market. So from the wholesale price, that's yet to be determined, but we keep that factor in mind that we're very well cognizant of. And the second of all is on the e-commerce platform, where the commission is also going to be in the retail space. Not me as a regulator, but on the business side of the house will be in the retail space. You know, they will set a retail price and keep that fourth objective in mind as well for retail. I mean, if we were to try and sell it at 2 or 3 times what the street price is for an illegal product, we're not going to be successful. So I'll keep that in mind. And then I think that's it for me. I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
So this is Matt from the city. First off, can everybody in the back hear me okay? I know there's a lot of noise in the background, but no? Up, up, up? Okay. So from the City of Calgary's point of view, as to the AGLC point, they came out with their regulations on February 16th. We were fairly fortunate in that we had a committee scheduled for the next week. So on February 21st, we came out with proposed recommendations for land use bylaw. Specifically, what a lot of people are interested in, obviously, is the retail aspect of things. So we proposed those on February 21st. It included a variety of regulations, things like separation distance between cannabis stores, a lot of people are interested in. Currently 300 meters is what we are proposing, which is pretty much in sync with what we have in Calgary for liquor stores. Beyond that, there's a 150 meter separation distance proposed for separation from schools. There was initially a proposed recommendation for separation from post-secondary. The committee voted to drop that. And there's a few other pieces, one of them being a recommended distance of 10 meters from what we call child care service, what most people think of as daycare. So I guess the most of my talk today is going to focus on retail aspect of things, because I feel like that's what the majority of the people here are here to hear about. But in addition to that, we also have, for example, other pieces that the city is looking at, things like public consumption, and that's going to be coming back to another committee on April 3rd. So the February 21st committee and the April 3rd committee recommendations are all going to be going to a public hearing of council on April 5th. And basically the public is invited to come to that. They can speak to the regulations that we're proposing. As far as what we proposed on February 21st, people can see that if you go to calgary.ca/cannabis. There's a link in there for cannabis-related businesses where you can see what those regulations are. So those are kind of a few of the top-level pieces, but obviously the regulations get a lot more fine-grained as you get into them. Beyond that, the April 5th date is really a starting point for us as well. So much like the AGLC, we are planning on hopefully having council vote on the recommendations that we're bringing there as far as regulations, et cetera, on April 5th. But as far as implementing those regulations, as far as being able to take applications in, we're looking at a several-week delay before implementation in order to basically allow us to get up to speed as a municipality and in order to respond to any changes that council might ask of those regulations, and also to educate those who want to retail in the city of Calgary. So I will also say that there's also regulations that we proposed for licensed producers, for example. Although there's already existing licensed producer regulations for the city of Calgary, for those wanting to get into it, there's a slight, I guess, name change is what it comes down to. Currently, they are listed as medical marijuana production facilities. We're changing the name to cannabis production facilities, but for those interested, there's also regulations in what we've proposed around cannabis production facilities. So for our perspective, the April 5th date is the council date. A few weeks thereafter is when we're going to begin accepting applications for business licenses, for development permits for changes of use for cannabis retail stores. And then what's going to happen after that remains to be seen as far as both the federal regulations that are coming out. We heard obviously that the Senate is not going to be making a decision until I believe it's June 7th. And if it goes back to the House, there's going to be an additional delay beyond that. And they are talking about building in an 8 to 12 week time frame in order to accommodate both provinces and municipalities being able to respond. So really what happens after April is really up in the air still, I suppose, but at least we've got a starting point on our end from municipal point of view. So I'm not going to get too much more into the specifics. I'll open it up to questions, though, from the crowd.
So thank you very much for the question. I see we now have a roving mic, but I'll repeat the question for those who may not have heard it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's a question about what requirements, if any, there are around signing a lease in order to enter into the licensing process. So.
Yeah, a lease, and then there was, I'll do that one, and there was
Do the
the
second
second part
one,
there. But question was, do we require a 10-year lease? The building the airplane as we're flying it is not good for anybody. So in the liquor licensing process, of which I have to tell you the cannabis process is quite similar. When we get an application, we require an executed lease. It's in Alberta law that you have to show you have the right to occupy. That's a problem right now for people. We heard it in a call-in retailer show last week that nobody knows the start date. And because you don't know the start date, it's kind of hard to anticipate when you want to enter into your lease or not. So we've made a change in process to allow you one of two options. And number one is submit us an executed lease. You've proven the right to occupy. That's easy for the AGLC. That might not be so easy for you to make that financial commitment today, and not knowing if A, you're going to qualify, B, if your location is going to qualify at the municipal level, because qualifying at the provincial level is pretty easy. I mean, you just read the regulations. If you're not within 100 meters of a school, as an example, or whatever, I mean, you're going to be fine for us, but you might not be fine for the municipality. And then, so those factors are ones that leave you in kind of the dark. So we have said we will allow you to submit an offer to lease. So at least you've got some negotiation in place with a landlord. But the AGLC does not have any requirement on the length of your lease, but you need to have the right to occupy. So we issue 1-year licenses. So I would expect to see a lease that would show you that you could occupy that premise for at least a year. It's up to you to decide if you want to submit an executed lease or if you want to submit an offer. We've heard some stories that there are multiple offers out there with the same address on it. If that comes to the attention of the licensing branch, we will direct all applicants to get an executed lease. We need to know who's got the right to occupy that premise. Can you repeat the second part there? Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, you're kind of in a rock and a hard place, but so is the regulator. So you have to make a business decision if you want to execute a lease or not, number one. That's a business decision. Number two is you may, and I'm not giving legal advice, put in a break clause into that lease. So that happens every day. If I can't live up to my obligations and Ethan is the landlord, there may be something in the clause that says I'll have to pay you so much to get out of it. So those are the situations that are in there. Now, you asked about first come, first serve. No, I think I want to be very clear. It's not first come, first serve. What are the licensing requirements? They're on aglc.ca. We are not picking winners and losers, and we don't hand out licenses based on, we don't assess your financial viability. However, as part of your background check, we are going to ask where you're getting your money from to start your store. If it looks like you don't have a wooden nickel, you know, if you don't mind me saying, that would lead us to further questions as to whether you actually are viable enough to start your business and where you might be getting your income from in order to run it. I think everybody's understanding that the regulator needs to make sure that the money that you're sourcing is coming from legal funds. It's not coming from criminal element. The government's been very clear on that direction provided to us. So we're not picking winners and losers. If you meet the criteria for licensing, congratulations, and I hope you do well.
Do I start over, or do I go, I have a new spot and my form, like everything is still with you guys and here's my new location, or does it cost me another $4,000 or whatever?
Okay, great question. I'm glad you answered it, and I think you'll be happy with the answer as well. So, yeah, that could happen. Just what Matt said. I mean, we don't know, for example, in the city of Calgary, for sure, what the final rules are going to be. And I might want to, I'm not getting in this space, by the way, but it would be wrong and it would be illegal. But I might want to open a store, and then we find out Matt wants to open a store, and Matt's turns out to be 75 meters away from me. It's 2 strip malls across the street from each other. Obviously, there's going to be a decision-making process at the municipal level. Who's going to get that license? So let's go with that scenario. You find out you're good. You passed your background check. We took your money, your $400 on your non-refundable application fee, and we find out that your address is no good. The AGLC is going to allow you to select a new location at no cost. So I need to keep in mind that the due diligence background check process is a separate process all unto itself. So once you become qualified with us, you may not end up with the location you want. You might be on the sidelines for 6 months finding something else, but you passed the record check. So you're good on the record check. As long as your situation hasn't changed, you've got the same investors and whatever, you're good. If it was 2 weeks later, no problem. Give us your new application, your new floor plans, all that stuff. We won't ask for $400. After we're up and running, now let's say we start in July and everything goes well, and it's now December. I mean, it's just like a regular application process now, like we do with liquor. I want an executed lease right up front, all those things, because we're up and running now, so you'll have a location, and you'll know by then what the municipal rules are, so we wouldn't expect to get applications that would be in non-compliance.
I have one more over here. So I live in a small rural community, and the land use bylaw, I know we're all waiting for what municipalities are doing, but they're taking the school to mean homeschools as well. So basically, the community I live in is not allowing a cannabis retail space. Is there a clarity that the government could give to municipalities regarding that it doesn't mean homeschooled and it's just institutions, or?
So that issue has come to our attention, and it was a bit of a surprise. As Dave said, we're moving quickly and building the airplane in mid-flight, and that was one that, frankly, we didn't anticipate. So we are looking at it right now. What I'll say, though, generally, if a municipality does not want to have cannabis retail in their community, there's a number of tools they can use to make that happen. So if that's the goal, and they're using the homeschool connection as the mechanism, there are going to be other mechanisms that they will be able to use. And quite frankly, from a provincial point of view, we've allowed them to have that discretion to use the tools at their disposal. So if it's a technical issue that we need to fix because they think the law is binding them to those separation distances from home schools, we can look at fixing the technical issue. If we're opposed and we don't want it, they're going to be able to find another way to prevent it.
Did you have follow-up? Did you have follow-up? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm a liquor retailer. Quick question for Matt. You mentioned separation distances. Is there any parameters for separation distances, cannabis shops in comparison in relation to liquor stores?
Good question. So what was proposed in the report was not what ended up getting recommended by committee. So in the report, it was proposed a 30-meter separation distance, but committee actually recommended that be dropped, and instead of a 30-meter separation distance, they asked that instead the local bylaws state that the liquor stores and the cannabis stores not be adjacent to one another.
Okay, so they can't share a demising wall.
That's basically, what they're asking for.
Okay, and one quick question for Dave. As a liquor store entity,
We know each other.
yeah, Dave, can you? So the liquor store entity, the corporation, can that entity apply for a cannabis license, or do you have to form a new corporate entity?
Yeah, new corporate entity, very much similar to our current separation of business requirements. So they can have a parent company, just like some companies do already currently in the liquor industry, but new corporate entity, new CORS registration is to make it simple.
Thank you.
You bet.
So our next panel starts in 5 minutes, so I've got time for 2, maybe 3 questions. I think we've got 2 people over here and 1 person over here.
I wanted to ask relative to Class D liquor licenses for delivery. Are we going to see anything come to fruition for the developing cannabis landscape?
Good question. I mean, in a very fulsome liquor market right now, you have the ability to do delivery service. That's not going to be the case for now. So if I could maybe make it a simple answer, there's a short answer is no. And I know we're going to have one more question, but I said I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this out. There's no way we knew that we could answer every question here today, and a lot of the questions are directed at the regulator. There are a couple addresses. I hope everybody's been to our webpage already, but aglc.ca/cannabis. Couple things on due diligence background check questions. Due diligence at aglc.ca. Send them an email, or on the application package itself, it has a number. It's 732-6300, I think, 780. But give them a call. They're there to answer your questions. Licensing questions, inspections at aglc.ca. You can send that in. Conversely, there are 5 AGLC inspections and licensing offices in the province. The numbers are all published. Give them a call. There's no way we can answer all the questions, but I tell you what, we're building an FAQ form that's a living document on our webpage, and it's growing daily. And from a thing that Ethan and I did last week, we added like 5 more questions to it. So we keep getting good ones like we had, and we make it a living document. So please try and go there, because I think you can get some good source. Hey.
I am impressed because I can barely remember my own phone number. You recited all that off very well.
Hi, guys.
One more?
Is it on? Testing? Testing. There we go. My name is Michelle. I actually have 2 questions. First of all, you guys had mentioned there's going to be a 90-day leeway for the security checks. Is that going to be an ongoing thing that everyone will have to continue to update as they're working in a retail store?
That's a great question, and I'm not even sure if we have that, on our website, because I was looking at that yesterday, I think, and I was thinking, we should probably be a little more clear. So the requirement that when you submit your check, that it be 90 days is a thing that we've always had for gaming and liquor, and that will be for here. So we want a recent background check. But with the self-safe certification program, we plan on that certification being valid for 5 years. And we don't expect you to submit a criminal record check every 90 days or whatever. You will sign a consent that allows the AGLC at any time in that 5 years to conduct its own check. So that way, if I need to, I can go back and take a look, but you only have to submit that once every 5 years. When your certification is up for renewal, you will need to get a new check. You will also have to apply again to renew your qualified worker status.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers that.
That does, thank you. And part two, the City of Calgary, what is the business licensing going to look like? Is it going to be the same type of fees as liquor stores?
So I missed that, I think, but it was about the fees associated with business licenses. At this point, yeah, we're not looking at basically increasing the fees for cannabis specific beyond anything that we have for the rest of the city. So business licenses for pretty much every other business in the city of Calgary are pretty straightforward. We anticipate, although we don't bring it to committee until April 3rd, we anticipate they're likely going to stay the same.
Okay, I want to thank our panelists. We can get a round of applause for coming out and speaking with us today. And I imagine if you